Well, hi everyone. I'm John Ritland with a bit of a different retro review concept this time around. I'm going to talk about Lex Luger's 3 runs with the WCW United States Championship from February 1989 to July 1991. And 2.5 years, he didn't have too many days where he wasn't champion. He was a constant, holding the second tier championship, pretty much the championship that elevated you to the world title, pretty much like the Intercontinental Championship in WWE, but the US Championship had even more prestige behind it. Their, personal bias aside, because I've always had disdain for Lex Luger, and I've talked about that in multiple videos, and I'm not going to go into that here, but many of you know the personal bias that I've had towards him. Though I didn't feel he had deserved the main event runs that he got, and the death of Liz and stuff like that, and a lot of other reasons. We just all have people that we don't like, and just he always didn't set right with me. But I'm always willing to challenge myself with these retro reviews, and that's why I'm going to do this and put my biases aside and look at this objectively. And honestly, he has some pretty damn good matches here. And if you look at the history before this, like if you look how they were building him, he teamed up with Barry Windham and won the World Tag Team Championships for a little bit. Then Barry Windham turned heel after, causing him to lose the championships. And then he entered a program with Ric Flair, Great American Bash, Starrcade. There was a lot, in '88. I mean, he was having some really good goddamn matches. Because Flair could get a lot at it anyway. He made Lex Luger look like $1 million goddamn dollars. And by 1989, they were doing some pretty good stuff here. And I mean, even though the Jim Herd era, oh boy, the Jim Herd era, could always do a deep dive on that at some point, as best as I possibly could. Lex Luger was, after finishing that program with Flair, what were they going to do with him? Because they didn't want to put the belt on Luger, but he was seen as somebody that, could be the guy. Oh, if Flair hadn't screwed him over, he would have been that. So what do you do next with him? Well, you have him face his former tag team partner, Barry Windham, at the Chi-Town Rumble 1989, and you have him beat Barry Windham for the U.S. Championship. Okay, not a bad start. You revisit all the history with these guys, former tag team champions and all that. And Barry Windham would be gone from the NWA pretty soon after this, and then would be back, and then back to WWE. And boy, he bounced around a whole lot. But back to Lex Luger. I'm not going to go over all the house show details and stuff like that, but I'm going to talk about the clashes and talk about the pay-per-views. And, not a bad start. February 20th, 1989. And then he beats Jack Victory in a dark match at the Clash of Champions 6. Which was the one that was in the Superdome that wasn't advertised well because George Scott was a goddamn idiot. Listen to Cornette's podcast if you want to find out. Yes, I don't agree with everything Cornette says, but boy, he is a good wrestling historian, and my God, Clash of Champions 6 should have been a whole lot better. But yeah, Jack Victory, okay, maybe not the best title defense, and it was a dark match. But then, and I remember reviewing Wrestle War 1989, this was the infamous one where Luger didn't take the DDT all that well. It was the infamous DDT botch. But he lost to Michael Hayes, who had Hiro Matsuda, who was Lex Luger's trainer, in his corner. And there were a bunch of shenanigans and everything, but Michael Hayes got the victory and won the U.S. Championship. However, he would only hold on to it for 15 days. And then Lex Luger would win it back. So he only held it for like 2.5 months. But then he got it back. And then thus would begin his longest run with the championship. 523 days. 523 days. That's insane, even thinking about the fact that there were champions that, they held on to titles for quite a bit. But this is when all the territories were basically going away, and it would just soon become WCW, WWE, and then you would have ECW rise up, but that would be a few years. So even the occasional, independents, modern independents, they might have champions run that long, but they weren't running consistent shows. And Lex, he was showing up every single night, and he managed to get... I guess a kind of watchable match out of Michael Hayes, because when Lex Luger's your best worker, DDT botch aside, that's saying something. But again, beats Hayes on May 22nd to begin his longest run. He wasn't part of the Clash of Champions Guts and Glory in June of '89, where Steamboat faced Terry Funk, and Lex Luger was upset being being taken off of the, or not being put on the card, so he attacked Steamboat. Basically, he was upset, and he was like, well, hey, hang on a second. I'm the U.S. champion, and I was always in contention with Flair, and he would always cheat. Why am I not getting this? So therefore, Flair would turn heel. And Luger had been a babyface for a while. He was always a much better heel. I mean, honestly, you can not like Luger, but he was always much more of a heel. much, much better. I mean, I'm not saying that he was the worst babyface in the world, but if you compare and contrast, he was like a number 9 heel and he was like a number 4 babyface. So he sets up that match after attacking Steamboat and all that. And then the Steamboat match at Great American Bash 89 was originally going to be no DQ. Luger says, no. We either waive the no DQ thing or we're not getting this. Because even though he had attacked Steamboat, he knew Steamboat would beat him in a no DQ match, and he wanted that out because you couldn't have a championship change via DQ, at least unless, anybody in charge suddenly decided to say, oh, you've been cheating too much. Now, if you get counted out or lose via DQ, you're going to lose the championship. It's a bit of a weird rule and everything, bit of a rule that they can stretch out. So he faces Steamboat, pretty damn good match, and then he wins via DQ after Steamboat attacks him because a chair gets brought in, all this stuff, and pretty damn good match, though, because Steamboat, even at that point, he would have a few years left of his full-time career. He'd get a good match out of anybody, and he'd just have come off of that trilogy with Flair, that incredible trilogy. And there was a lot of history there, because both men had faced Flair before, and they were building up this thing with the U.S. Championship. So, okay, he wins via DQ, Steamboat's still in contention, but then at Clash of the Champions, in September, you have him beat Tommy Rich. Okay, Tommy Rich by this point wasn't really much of anything, but you know what? Hey, he beat a former NWA World Champion. So building that up, he was getting over more as a heel. And then he beat Brian Pillman at Halloween Havoc 1989 in an incredible match. One of the best matches in 1989, I would argue. At least on pay-per-view. If you look at WWE and WCW, if that's not top 5, I don't know what is. Or at least close. I would put that top 5. Because it was a goddamn great match. And Pillman had just come on the scene a few months before. And he almost had Lex beat, and then they just, kept building with that. Even though he beat him, he beat him, but Pillman did look weak in defeat, and then beat him again at Clash of Champions the following month. And that was where Flair beat Funk in the I Quit match. So they're building up all this stuff with Lex. He didn't defend the U.S. Championship at Starrcade 1989. He competed in the Future Shock tournament, where, despite the fact that he never took a loss because of the weird convoluted point system, he didn't actually win the whole damn thing. Sting won it by beating Flair, and then they would build the Sting-Flair rivalry that would eventually culminate at Wrestle War. But, oh wait, Sting tears his ACL just before that, and he can't compete. So they suddenly got to switch Luger babyface. So he's a U.S. champion facing a world champion, Ric Flair. They're revisiting that rivalry, where they had a lot of great matches. I mean, these matches in 90, of course, weren't quite as good as the 1988 ones. And that's not knocking either performer. It's not knocking either wrestler at all. But it was a stopgap because they were trying to get Sting, they were trying to make sure that they nursed it along for Sting to recover, and then Flair was going to put the belt on Sting. So he lost to Flair via countout at Wrestle War 90 when Sting was out there on crutches. The Horseman got to him, and then Luger's fighting him off, but he gets back in. Just after the 10 count, and it was a very damn good match. It was like 30 minutes, something like that. It was really, really good stuff. Because again, Flair could bring out the most out of anybody, and Luger did that, switched babyface rather naturally, because people wanted to see Luger defend in the name of Sting. They wanted to see him defend his name, that is. And then we keep going on, this kind of stuff. They didn't have a clash in April, opposite of WrestleMania 6, like they'd had clashes the opposite WrestleMania 4 and 5, because suddenly Turner just stopped giving a shit. But he beat Flair via DQ at Capital Combat 1990, which I just retro-reviewed recently. And yeah, it was a DQ in a steel cage match, which was kind of bullshit. And it wasn't their best match. It had some good moments, but it wasn't their best match. But then, he goes on. Sting recovers. Sting faces Flair at Great American Bash 90, while they've still got Luger as a babyface, and he's still the U.S. champion. So he's probably still defending on house shows and stuff like that, but he's champion match, matches with Flair while Sting recovers. And then he beats Sid Vicious at Clash of Champions 11. That really wasn't all that much of a match to write home about. And then he beats Mean Mark Callis, Undertaker, at Great American Bash 90. Okay, cool. Hey, we're looking at some pretty good stuff. And at the Clash in September, he beat Flair via DQ, because Flair's no longer champion and facing Lex for the U.S. Championship. But that way, Flair doesn't win the championship. Lex continues his reign, and mind you, it's well over a year now. He's fainting on house shows. He's doing a whole bunch of great stuff. And then he lost to Stan Hansen when they brought him into WCW for some shots during his, in between his All Japan stuff. He lost to Stan Hansen at Halloween Havoc 1990. So 523 days as champion. That's something that's never going to be beat. I mean, it might be beaten actually if Andrade just holds on to the championship on Raw and doesn't ever defend the damn thing, because that seems to be where they're going with it. Hell, all he would have to do is hold on to it till after Mania next year. After Mania next year, or I think maybe by May. But anyway, then they revisit the Stan Hansen thing in a Texas Lariat match at Starrcade 1990, and Stan Hansen drops the title back to him. So Lex begins another run that would go on for about 7 months. He won a tag match with Sting versus Doom at Clash of Champions 14. Doom were an incredible tag team, by the way. I mean, I think they broke up pretty soon after this, because they lost the titles at Wrestle War 91 when Butch Reed would then turn on Ron Simmons, and that would begin that feud, and that would be at the end of Butch Reed. But then Luger beats Dan Spivey at Wrestle War 91, and I reviewed that one recently also. That one wasn't all that good. In fact, I would argue that match is pretty shitty, but when Lex is your best worker and Dan Spivey sucked. Dan Spivey was rotten. They had no goddamn chemistry. There was nothing good that they could do there. But then at Super Brawl 91, they had a tag team title match with the Steiners, where he teamed with Sting, and they lost when Nikita Koloff did a run-in with the Chain, because Nikita Koloff had made a return. And also, Nikita Koloff had hit Luger at Wrestle War 91 with the U.S. Championship, and they were going to revisit that after they had faced off, years before. Nikita Koloff had come back to wrestling after his wife had unfortunately passed away, and he had taken some time away from wrestling. But then he beats a Great Muta at Clash of Champions 15, and then we go all the way to the big culmination here, where he beats Barry Windham for the vacant NWA WCW World Heavyweight Championship. And the reason that he was still U.S. champion at this time and competed for the world title is because Jim Herd had chased Ric Flair out of his contract. Or chased Ric Flair out of WCW, basically, and Ric Flair decided to make a call up north. Don't blame him, because Jim Herd was a goddamn idiot to chase everybody good out of WCW. And even if they returned, they weren't there for long, because Jim Herd ran the goddamn company into the ground. So it's a steel cage match, and it wasn't even the main event. The crowd kept chanting, "We want Flair, we want Flair," and Luger had been a babyface all this time. Former tag team champions facing off. After facing off at Chi-Town Rumble and revisiting that, and so 2.5 years later, it all ties back to Barry Windham. And what happens is Harley Race comes down and basically says to Lex Luger, "Now's the time." He hits the pile driver. And he because Harley Race used to utilize pile driver, as well as a diving headbutt, and he regrets doing that. Rest in peace, Harley Race. So he does that, and Luger switches heel, wins the World Heavyweight Championship, has to relinquish the U.S. Championship. So that third run lasted longer than the first run. It was just about 7 months. I think it was about 6.5 months, so about 200 days, close to it. He then would go on to have a great run with the world title. But, and I'll talk about that at some other point or whatever, talk about some forgotten WCW title runs. But Lex Luger's, lineage, or, his name in the lineage of the NWA WCW US Championship is pretty up there, because he had a lot of days as champion. Now, I mean, any subsequent runs he could have had after that, after going to Vince and then coming back, weren't going to be nearly as good, because they were tossing titles around like crazy. But looking at 60-something days, about 70 days, and then 523 days, and then about 200 days, it's a lot of goddamn days. Now, I mean, I'm probably off on the math a little bit, but he had a lot of days as U.S. champion. And honestly, Lex Luger, love him or hate him, and we all know how I feel. He did a lot of good there. He did a lot of goddamn good. And he had a pretty good run with the U.S. Championship. So I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know some other, title runs you want me to talk about. I'll do my best. Let's stick to WWE or WCW, and let's see what I can do. But if you want to throw out New Japan, let's go ahead. But WCW, WWE, let's try that. Anyway, agree, disagree with what I said. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.